Alright, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Only Divergences. You guys know what's up. Here we take a strict technical analysis approach looking at stocks, no narratives, no stories, none of that. Before we start, special thank you to everybody who keeps liking my videos and all the new subscribers. If you find value in these videos through analysis or through explicit signals that I'm going to provide, then subscribe, and we can take this journey together. So, man, what a day today. Right, so markets have had their first really big red day in a long time, and today we're going to take a look at the VIX because I talked about the VIX 5 days ago. Take a look at that video. I'm going to put a link in the description, but also on the top right, right over here. Click on that. The title of the video was 300% upside for VIX coming, and while that seemed crazy 5 days ago, I think that it's not so crazy today, and I think as we progress over the next few weeks, it's not going to be that crazy, right? So what I want to do today is just provide a short update. Watch that video because it does explain not only how I see the VIX, but how I see the patterns in the VIX and why I did say that there was a lot of upside potential for the VIX at that stage for it to go to possibly 60. Okay, so taking a look at the VIX, let's recall that I did say that I was concerned that we would have sort of a repeat of what happened with COVID, because remember, we had this big fractal here, which was a huge falling wedge, and then what happened is we had a gap, and then it just kind of continued. Well, we've got a similar falling wedge. I mean, it's not the same, but it's a similar falling wedge, and what happened was what I was concerned would happen. We have this gap and a breakthrough, right? And let me just draw this out so that everybody can see. If you haven't watched the previous video where it's clear, you can see that falling wedge there, see? And as soon as it broke out above it, well, that was all she wrote. Well, this was a pretty clean falling wedge. Today, we don't have a falling wedge that is as clean, but remember, with technicals and trendline drawing, it is a science, but it's also an art, right? So you want to exercise discretion with regards to what where you draw the line. Right, so we can make an argument that this was a downward sloping, a wedge resistance here for the VIX for a long time. We had this point here, this point here, this point here, 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 and now we've broken out above that wedge. Right, so what that tells me is that we're going to have a lot of work to do on the VIX over the next few weeks before we can say, okay, well, we're done with this and, we're ready for new all-time highs. I think there's going to be a lot of work to do, and my concern is that we this little thing turns into this. That's my concern. Now, in order to get a better understanding of where we are, we're going to have to take a look at the S&P 500. I generally would take a look at the futures, but I really want to keep this video short because there's so much that I can cover, and I don't want to go too long here. Also, I did start recording this video before market close, so it is 3:30 right now. So the market is not yet closed, but we can see that it seems to have hit a low for the day. So that'll be interesting for us if we take a deeper look at that. But in order to get an understanding, we need to look at the S&P 500, and we need to do it as we always have, starting with the weekly time frame. So one thing that you want to notice, you want to point out here is that we've been in a very long, thin trend, and what we're seeing right now could be the beginning of the end of that, right? The only thing I want to point out on the MACD, the only thing I want to point out on the weekly is that the MACD here really seems to be rolling over. We've been up here, we've been pushing the limits of the MACD to continue with positive momentum, and now we've, if you look here, you can see that the negative histogram is just starting, and it's starting to roll over. And remember, this is a weekly chart, so we're already at 3 negative weeks on the S&P 500, right? So that's all I want to show on the weekly, because I think that we can get a better understanding of what's going on the daily here. So let me just, let me just pull this up here. Yeah, good. So it's continuing to hold. So everybody and their grandma has been paying attention to this trend line since the COVID lows, right? And more recently since it's been validated time and time again. So you can see it's not the exact COVID lows, but again, a trend line becomes validated the more times it gets hit. So the more times you can validate a trend line, the more it becomes real. And you can draw a trend line insofar as you have 3 points, because any 2 points, you can draw a line between any 2 points. Once you have 3 points, that's when it becomes a trend, right? So we have this, Here it was supported, here it was supported, here it didn't touch it exactly, but it got close. Here as well, some support here, 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 and then last week we tried to have this as a dip, got a little sloppy here, and so we had a little bit of a divergent bounce, but then we gave up the ghost, so to speak. And now we're well below this trend line. So that tells me that the dynamic of the entire market may have shifted. And we have to be very, very careful, especially with this elevated VIX that we're starting to see. So that's just that trend line. I wanted to show that. So we've broken that trend line, but also we had this 50-day moving average, right? And then actually, let me open the 100-day as well. And you can see that both of those moving averages acted as pretty good support since the lows. Since the stock market broke above it, right? So here, support, here was the 100. Here we just dipped a little bit below the 100. But remember, this was the election day, right? Then the 50 supported, 50, the 100, 50, 50, 50. Look at that, perfect. 50, 50, just a bit above it. And then we broke down below it. So again, what we're seeing is a breakdown of material upward trend lines, whether it's the exponential moving average or the trend line that I showed you here earlier, right? So that tells us that we need to manage our expectations with regards to what we can see in terms of upside moving from here. So similarly to how prior to the COVID sell-off, we had a nice big move above the 50 and the 100. But as soon as it broke, it was, a sell-off, right? Well, here we have a similar thing. The only difference is that our trend above the 50 and the 100 is really long, right? So you can make the argument that this was trending above the 50 and 100 since the beginning of 2019. And there was a bit of a break below, but then, you can argue that it was holding, right? And then it came up here, and as soon as it broke, fell, you have a nice little bounce, and then you have a further fall. Well, we've got a nice trend line. And now it's broken down. I don't think we're going to get the exact same movements, obviously, but I'm concerned that there is much more downside to go because this isn't just another dip. This is a break of a very long trend line, right? And so we need to pay attention to that. And we need to appreciate the potential for what that could mean longer term in terms of the market moving higher. Now, what I'm looking at right now is the potential. As many of you know, subscribers, I'm looking for one thing, bullish divergence potential, right? So that can happen on any time frame. Here we have a situation. Well, let me just pull this up here. Excuse me. Yeah, we can see. All right, we've hit the we've hit the low of the day, I think, considering it's 3:30 right now, and we're already off the low by maybe 0.5% or something. So that looks like we have hit the low. So that means that we may be holding here at the 100-day. So that's interesting. But as we said, I'm looking for bullish divergence, right? One thing I want to point out is that even though the market has come down quite a lot and come down for a bit, for 3 weeks now, I think, objectively, let's take a look at this indicator that I'm really a fan of, the DMI here. What we can see is green is very elevated. It's up at this level around a 38.5 reading, right? Well, what do we notice? We notice that every single time this reading has gone up here, here, we've had a subsequent move higher, right? Got a subsequent move higher, subsequent move higher, subsequent move higher, right? And so we're now back to here. So we would expect a move higher unless this time it's different, right? Because we get to make that same argument about elevated green back here. But what happened is that this time we had elevated green and it kept going, right? And so that could really be what happens here if we don't get some support right away, right? But in any event, again, I'm just looking for bullish divergence. So let's go to the hourly, take a look to see if we have bullish divergence. Well, we don't, right? So what we have is we have a very negative MACD down here, but it's the first initial thrust, right? Now, we can make a very strong argument that there have been times like this and this where we had one thrust and then it bounced higher. And I think that we are going to get a bounce higher. In fact, we are getting a bounce higher right now. I mean, let's just take a look at the SPY. Yeah, we're off of the lows by almost 0.7%. So that's pretty good. But we have to ask ourselves, is this sufficient? Is this strong enough for us to want to go in long here? And how far long do we want to go? Right. So if you take a look at the hourly, we can't expect a bounce here, but a bounce to where? Well, without bullish divergence, I can't make that call, right? We don't have it on the hourly. We don't have it on the 30, although we're starting to turn around here. Right, we're starting to turn around here. And on the 15, we don't have a previous lower low, so we would need another low for this to be a bullish divergence. Now, one thing I want to do before I end this video here is, well, let's just go back and take a look at what happened with COVID. Because remember, we had a similar situation where price moved lower, and we're basically kind of here, right? It seems that we're here, right? We were in the initial MACD move lower. Let me just split this so you can see both side by side. These are both the S&P500. These are both the hourly. And we can see that when we had that daily sell-off, we had the MACD come down. We had a little bit of a bounce. So we had MACD come down, so we could get a little bit of a bounce here. Honestly, we could get a little bit of a bounce here. But the question is, how far does that bounce continue? See, what we're looking for is something like this. Now, we don't have a quote-unquote subsequent low on the MACD, which would allow this to be bullish divergence. This requires a bit more analysis with the sensitive indicator, the DMI, which we don't have right now. Right. What this looks like, to be perfectly honest, let's take a look at this. Take a look at the DMI here. We have elevated green, a rising black, and a low red. Well, here we had elevated green, a rising black, and low red. So we could be right here. And unfortunately, what that means is that there's a lot more downside. Now, I don't want to predict that, but what I do want to say is that at this point, it's not the best to be going long. I want something a bit stronger. I want this, right? I want to be buying here so that I can ride this up. And I don't think that where we are right now, let me just take a look here. Oh yeah, we're bouncing quite strongly, but I don't think that that is going to be enough for us to say, okay, we'll forget about it, let's just go. I think it's going to happen this week. I'm looking for a nice entry point for a bounce this week, but it's got to be divergent. So, you know, longer term, things are getting a little interesting, right? The VIX has broken out. The SPY has broken down from its trend line and done so with a gap. And we're certainly getting lots of volatility. Let me just pull up the average true range here. This is a really great indicator. I really like this one. And we can see that we're still rising in terms of true range, right? So price volatility is still rising. So we haven't hit the bottom, because usually when you have a spike in volatility, once you get there, that's the bottom, right? And then it goes smaller. So you want to be buying closer to the peak. Now, it's really tough to ask yourself the question, when do we know it's the peak? You know, that's the million-dollar question. I think that at this point, we still have a bit of time. And I'm going to be looking for that later in the week. But right now, sit tight, be patient. The market still needs to digest some stuff. And I don't think that we're at a point right now where we're strong enough to say, okay, well, the market's going to turn around and it's off to the races. Even the, you can see even the futures here, you know, it's pretty steep here, right? But average true range continues to rise. And so we're looking for a crescendo. We might be getting, you know, we're close to the previous peak in terms of average true range. But again, because the fact that this is a move that broke a previous trend line, we have to approach it in a different light, right? We have to be patient because, you know, the sell-off is probably not over. And the main reason why the sell-off isn't over is because we don't have the divergence. We don't have the setup that we're looking for to be confident that we could experience a 3, 4, 5% move at this point. That's what we're looking for. And it's going to require patience, and it might mean that we don't trade until Friday. It might mean that we don't trade until next week. But we have to be patient here because we're really only looking for a handful of trades like this that are home runs. All right, so I'll be updating this tomorrow morning. I'll probably update a specific stock as well. Thanks for watching. Give this video a like. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be with you throughout this entire correction, and I'm going to show you, you know, what the objective potential is, and I hope that you can keep me accountable, and you know, we'll be on this journey together. Okay, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.